Welcome to the Jasmine Podcast.
What if the absolute best thing you could do for your career today, like right now, is to sit on your couch, stare at the wall, and do absolutely nothing?
Oh,
And I don't mean, doing nothing as a little 5-minute break before you get back to the grind. I mean that the actual act of doing zero, zip, zilch is scientifically the most potent strategy for advancing your professional life and protecting your health and even mastering complex new skills, like, say, becoming completely fluent in English.
I mean, it sounds like a really fast track to getting fired or just failing your exams, right? Because it goes against literally every single message we receive from the moment we wake up.
It really does. And I have to be completely honest here. Looking through the research we're unpacking for this deep dive today, my immediate reaction was just this, massive spike of anxiety.
Absolutely. It's triggering.
It is, because, if you're listening to this right now, there's a very, very high probability that you are a learner. You are someone who wants to optimize everything. You're probably listening to us while commuting or, folding laundry or speed walking to a meeting. And the idea that constant motion equals actual progress is just, it's wired into our DNA at this point.
Yeah, that fear of falling behind is an incredibly powerful motivator.
Right.
But what the data from our sources is revealing, quite starkly actually, is that this relentless drive is the exact mechanism that's holding us back. Like, our biological hardware just wasn't designed for an endless sprint.
But wait, let me just play devil's advocate right out of the gate here, because I know exactly what people are thinking.
Go for it.
The world is moving incredibly fast, right? If I'm trying to master a second language, say English, or if I'm trying to get a promotion, my peers are out there grinding, they're doing the work, they're studying vocabulary flashcards at midnight, they're networking. If I just, stop and stare at a wall, the math says I lose.
Right. The math says they pass you by.
Exactly. Like, if I don't memorize those English words today, how can hitting the brakes possibly accelerate my learning? How do I not just get left entirely in the dust?
And that panic you're feeling, it's completely understandable. But it's based on this really fundamental misunderstanding of how the human brain actually processes and stores information.
Okay, how so?
Well, we tend to view the brain like a computer hard drive, right? Like, you just keep typing data into it, you keep showing it English vocabulary, and as long as there's space, it saves the file.
Right, or like a machine.
Exactly, like a combustion engine. Just add more caffeine, push the RPMs higher, and you just go faster.
Yeah, that is essentially how I treat my brain on a Thursday afternoon. Just pour another coffee in and hope for the best.
I think most of us do, right? But the brain is a biological organism. It's not a machine. It operates on these natural cycles of exertion and recovery.
Yeah.
And right now, modern culture is essentially demanding that we skip the recovery phase entirely.
We just delete it from the schedule.
Completely. We're trying to force biological systems to operate like software, and it is resulting in a really profound physiological toll. So, to understand why doing nothing is so productive, we first have to understand the biological disaster of doing something all the time.
Let's get into that physiological toll then, because the physical reality of what we're doing to ourselves reading through these sources, it's actually shocking. The notes here talk about our nervous systems being locked in this permanent state of fight or flight.
Yeah, and that is the core issue here. Evolution designed the human nervous system with this brilliant survival mechanism. If you're, walking through the jungle thousands of years ago and you encounter a predator.
Like a tiger or something.
Right, a tiger. Your sympathetic nervous system instantly takes over. Adrenaline, cortisol, just a massive spike in heart rate.
Your whole body just alarms.
Exactly. And biologically, blood is literally diverted away from your digestive organs and away from your higher order cognitive functions.
Wait, really? It actually moves the blood away from your brain?
From the parts of your brain that do deep creative thinking. Yes. Because you don't need to write poetry or learn grammar when a tiger is chasing you.
That makes sense. You just need to run.
Right. The blood gets pushed directly into your muscles, your pupils dilate. You are entirely focused on one short-term goal, which is survival. You run, you escape the tiger, you get back to your cave.
And then, theoretically, the panic turns off.
Yes, exactly. Once you're safe in the cave, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. This is what we call the rest and digest phase. Your heart rate drops, the cortisol clears out of your bloodstream, and your brain returns to its baseline.
Which lets you think normally again.
Right. It allows you to think long-term, to heal, and to actually process complex information. That cycle, intense stress followed by deep absolute recovery, That's how we are biologically built to function.
But the modern environment doesn't allow for the recovery phase at all because the tiger isn't an animal anymore. The tiger is like the notification chime on your phone.
Yes, exactly.
It's the unread email sitting in your inbox at 9 p.m. It's the pressure to perfectly memorize 50 new English words by tomorrow morning for your language class.
And because that inbox is never truly empty, and that pressure to improve just never stops, the tiger literally never leaves the cave.
Yeah.
We are sustaining this low-level, chronic fight or flight activation from the moment we wake up until the moment we just pass out from exhaustion.
Which creates this bizarre psychological side effect where we actually feel guilty when we stop. I mean, think about the language we use, right? People will sit on the couch on a Sunday afternoon, maybe just look out the window, and their internal monologue just starts screaming at them.
Oh, absolutely. What are you doing?
Yeah, you're wasting time. You should be studying. You're being lazy. It's like we view rest as this actual crime against our own potential.
And that guilt is a symptom of a nervous system that has entirely forgotten how to switch off. It's
Right.
cultural programming completely overriding your basic biological needs. And the incredible irony here is that that exact guilt, that chronic stress, is the very thing preventing you from achieving the potential you're so worried about wasting.
Okay, how so? Let's tie this directly to skill acquisition.
Right.
Because a lot of people listening to this deep dive are actively trying to master something incredibly difficult, right? Like becoming fluent in a new language.
Sure.
If someone is highly stressed, if they're pushing themselves to the absolute limit, studying vocabulary every spare second they have, why does that stop them from learning? It feels like more effort should equal more results.
It does feel that way, but to understand why it doesn't work, we have to look at this concept in linguistics and cognitive psychology that the sources bring up. It's called the affective filter.
Okay, yeah, I saw that in the research. Walk us through how that actually works in the brain. What is an affective filter?
Think of the affective filter as this invisible neurological shield. It basically surrounds the language acquisition center of your brain, specifically impacting areas like the hippocampus, which is, critical for memory consolidation.
Okay.
When you are in a state of high curiosity, when you feel safe and relaxed and engaged, that filter is lowered. Your brain is highly receptive. So new information like the complex grammar rules of English or a new vocabulary list can flow in easily. It gets processed and stored efficiently.
So relaxation is actually a prerequisite for absorption. It's not just a nice bonus.
It's biologically mandatory.
Wow.
But when you're stressed, when your cortisol levels are elevated because you're terrified of falling behind or, you feel guilty for not studying hard enough, that affective filter slams shut.
Just completely blocks it out.
Yeah. The amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes fear and anxiety, basically hijacks the entire system. It signals to the rest of your brain that you are in physical danger. And therefore, learning the past tense of an English irregular verb is just not a survival priority. So the filter is raised to maximum capacity.
It's like the brain goes into full lockdown mode.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You could sit there with your flashcards, staring at the vocabulary for 3 hours straight, desperately trying to force the knowledge into your head. But with that affective filter up, that information literally bounces off the brain.
It just doesn't go in.
It does not enter long-term memory. You are exposing yourself to the data, sure, but you are biochemically incapable of retaining it.
Oh, man. So it's like trying to pour water into a sponge that's been squeezed incredibly tight in your fist.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like you can pour gallons of water, which represents all the vocabulary, the podcasts, the English textbooks. You can pour all of that over the sponge. But as long as your fist is clenched with stress and anxiety, the sponge cannot absorb a single drop. The water just spills everywhere. You get totally frustrated. And then you assume there's something wrong with the sponge. You assume, oh, I'm just not smart enough to learn this language.
That is the phenomenal way to visualize it. The sponge isn't broken. Your intelligence isn't the problem at all. The sponge is just clenched. The environment you've created inside your own mind is physically hostile to learning.
I think literally everyone listening can relate to that feeling of the clenched sponge. Like, have you ever sat down to read a really important report for work, or even just a chapter of a textbook, and you realize you just read the exact same paragraph 4 times in a row, but you have absolutely no idea what it said?
All the time.
Your eyes were scanning the letters, but your mind was stuck replaying an argument you had that morning or worrying about tomorrow's to-do list. The filter was completely up.
And what do we usually do when that happens? Do we stop and relax? No. We get angry at ourselves.
We push harder.
Exactly. We grip the sponge even tighter. We try to read the paragraph a fifth time, using just sheer willpower to force focus. And all that does is increase the stress, raise the effective filter even higher, and leave us completely exhausted with nothing to show for it.
Okay, so if the standard biological baseline we operate on right now, this constant teeth-gritting hustle, if that is fundamentally broken and actively preventing us from learning, is there a culture that actually gets this right?
Right.
Because telling an ambitious learner, someone who's terrified of falling behind, to just relax, usually massively backfires. It just makes them more anxious.
Yeah.
We need a totally different framework for what relaxation actually looks like in practice.
We do need a new framework.
Yeah.
And to find it, the researchers suggest we look entirely away from the hyper-optimized, corporate culture of the West, and we look toward Italy.
Ah, yes, the Italian approach. There is a great story in the research about a woman visiting Rome.
Right, Lily?
Yeah, Lily. She's sitting at this small cafe on a cobblestone street. It's the middle of the afternoon. She has an espresso in front of her, and she is doing absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
She isn't reading a book. She isn't checking her email. She isn't studying. She's simply watching the people walk by, listening to the ambient noise of the city, feeling the breeze. She's just existing.
And to a hyper-productive mindset, that scene looks almost scandalous.
It really does.
It looks like a massive waste of perfectly good afternoon you could be clearing your inbox. But in Italy, this isn't considered laziness. It is an elevated, highly intentional practice. They call it Dolce Far Niente.
Dolce Far Niente. The sweetness of doing nothing.
It's an entire philosophy built around the idea that taking time to exist without an agenda is not a bug in the human experience. It is a feature. It's a necessary component of a well-lived, functional life.
Okay, but I have to push back here because my brain immediately tries to find a loophole in this kind of beautiful concept. I'm thinking, fantastic. The sweetness of doing nothing. That means tonight I can lie on my couch for 4 solid hours, endlessly scrolling through short-form videos and social media feeds. I'm technically not working. I'm doing nothing. Therefore, I am practicing an ancient Italian philosophy. Is that what we're talking about here?
That is the exact trap almost everyone falls into, and we have to draw a very sharp scientific line right here.
Okay, draw the line.
There is a massive, measurable neurological difference between mindless distraction and purposeful rest.
Break that down for me, because when you're totally exhausted after a 10-hour workday, scrolling on your phone and staring at a wall in Rome feel like they serve the exact same purpose, which is escaping work.
They might feel like an escape emotionally, but structurally, inside your skull, they're doing opposite things to your brain. Laziness, or mindless distraction, is defined by a lack of intention and a massive overload of engineered stimuli.
Engineered stimuli, meaning the apps?
Right. When you're scrolling through a social media feed for hours, you are not doing nothing. Your brain is actually working incredibly hard.
Wait, even though I'm physically just lying there like a lump.
Absolutely. Think about what is happening on that screen. Every 15 seconds, the context completely changes. New faces, new audio tracks, flashing text, shifting emotional tones, like one video is hilarious, the next is enraging, the next is depressing.
That's so true. It's an emotional roller coaster.
It is a highly engineered dopamine slot machine. Your brain has to rapidly process all of that chaotic sensory input. It's burning through cognitive resources at an alarming rate just to keep up with the scroll. So scrolling doesn't rest your brain, it actively drains it.
So I'm essentially still running on the treadmill. I'm just looking at a screen while I run. I'm still squeezing the sponge.
You are squeezing it completely dry. Dolce Far Niente, on the other hand, is a purposeful choice. It is the active decision to step away from directed stimuli and simply allow your brain to process the ambient world at its natural pace.
The pace is the key difference there.
Exactly. When you're sitting at that cafe in Rome, you're receiving sensory input, right? You taste the bitter coffee, you hear the muffled conversation at the next table, you see the light hitting the old buildings. But the input is gentle, it's cohesive, and it's unforced.
It's not demanding you to react every 3 seconds.
Right. It doesn't demand a rapid-fire emotional response. This kind of purposeful pausing doesn't drain your cognitive reserves.
Yeah.
It actually allows them to refill.
It's almost the difference between numbing your brain and grounding your brain. Numbing is just bombarding the system so heavily with TikTok that you can't feel the stress anymore, but you're still doing damage beneath the surface. Grounding is actually turning the system off to let it physically cool down.
That is a brilliant distinction. Numbing versus grounding. And the philosophical takeaway from this Italian approach is deeply relevant to anyone trying to learn a language or create something new. You cannot have the inspiration to create within the world if you do not spend time simply observing it. If your head is always down, if you're constantly focused on output, producing, study, or working, you are never gathering the raw, ambient input that sparks profound understanding.
Okay, that makes sense on a philosophical level.
Yeah.
And it sounds beautiful. But let's take this out of the cafe in Rome and get into the hardcore mechanics of why this works biologically.
Let's do it.
Because if I'm going to convince a highly driven professional or an intense student who is terrified of failing their English exam to put their books away and just stare at the sky, I need heavy-hitting science. I need proof.
We could actually get into the neurobiology then. The research highlights two major scientific concepts that basically completely dismantle the hustle mindset. And they are brain atrophy and the productivity paradox.
Let's start with brain atrophy, because when I hear the word atrophy, I immediately picture like a broken arm that's been stuck in a plaster cast for 3 months.
Right, the muscle just wastes away.
Exactly. When the doctor finally cuts the cast off, the arm is shriveled, weak, and useless because it hasn't been moved. Are we saying that kind of physical shrinking is actually happening inside our skulls when we don't rest?
In a very real neurological sense, yes.
Seriously.
Yes. To understand this, we need to look at how the brain organizes its networks. When you are actively focused on a task, say, studying English grammar rules, writing an email, analyzing a spreadsheet, you are using what's called the brain's task-positive network.
Task-positive, okay.
This network is excellent for linear, focused execution. It's the network that gets things done.
It's the hustle network.
Exactly. But there is a completely different, equally vital network in the brain called the default mode network, or the DMN. This is a sprawling web of neural connections that only activates when your mind is wandering, when you are daydreaming, or when you are engaged in Dolce Far Niente.
So the default mode network is what powers that feeling of spacing out in the shower or just staring out the window of a train while commuting.
Yes, exactly. And for a long, long time, scientists thought the brain was just idling during those moments, like a car engine in neutral. But we now know, through brain imaging, that the DMN is incredibly active. It is the network responsible for connecting disparate ideas, solving complex problems in the background, generating creative insights, and crucially for our learners listening today, consolidating memories.
Wait, hold on. So the daydreaming network is actually the memory network.
They are deeply, deeply intertwined. When you step away from the English flashcards and let your mind wander, the DMN takes that new vocabulary and begins integrating it into your existing knowledge web. It's doing all the heavy lifting of learning, but it's doing it in the background.
So what happens when we refuse to rest? What happens when we stay in that task-positive network all day long, moving from work to studying to scrolling on our phones, and we never let the DMN turn on?
Well, this is where the atrophy occurs. The brain is highly efficient. It operates on a strict use-it-or-lose-it principle, which is a process known as synaptic pruning.
Pruning, like cutting dead branches off a tree.
Exactly. If you are constantly hustling, you are constantly suppressing the default mode network. Over time, because those specific pathways aren't being activated, the brain literally assumes they aren't needed anymore.
Oh my God.
So the neural connections dedicated to deep reflection, background problem solving, and creative synthesis actually begin to physically weaken and shrink.
Oh,
The atrophy.
that is utterly terrifying. We are literally dismantling our own capacity for brilliance by trying to force it. Like, we think we're making ourselves sharper and smarter by working 14 hours a day, but we're actually starving the very network that makes us intelligent in the first place.
Exactly. Which leads us directly into the second concept from the sources. The productivity paradox. Because if your default mode network is atrophying, your output is inevitably going to suffer.
The productivity paradox. I feel like we all instinctively know this one, even if we've never had a formal name for it. It's that feeling when you've been working on a document for like 6 hours straight, it's 11:30 at night, you're typing, but every single sentence feels like you are wading through waist-deep mud. And your internal monologue is just shouting at you, push through, work harder, just get it done. But nothing good is coming out.
Right. And the paradox is that you aren't actually working harder. Your perceived effort is skyrocketing, sure. You feel like you're climbing a mountain. But your actual cognitive effectiveness is plummeting. The productivity paradox states that forcing output without adequate rest inevitably and drastically lowers the quality of that output.
You're just trading actual quality for the illusion of motion. You feel busy, so you feel productive.
Exactly. You are just getting slower, your error rate is climbing, and you're entrenching a state of deep cognitive fatigue. A task that would normally take you 20 minutes with a fully rested brain is now taking you 2 hours of agonizing effort, and the result is still subpar.
This completely destroys the argument that doing nothing is a waste of time. If forcing work creates worse work, then stepping away isn't just a nice break, it's a strategic necessity.
It is. And that brings us to a really profound reframing of this entire topic. There's a line in the research that completely flips the script on how society views rest. And I think it is the ultimate antidote to the anxiety we talked about at the beginning of this deep dive.
Oh, lay it on us. Give us the quote.
The realization is this: we don't do nothing because we are lazy. We do nothing because we are ambitious for a better brain.
Wow. We don't do nothing because we are lazy. We do nothing because we're ambitious for a better brain. I want to pause and just let that sit for a second, because that changes the entire paradigm.
It really does. It reclaims rest from the realm of indulgence and luxury and places it firmly in the realm of high-performance strategy.
It transforms rest into an act of ambition rather than an act of surrender. Like if I am sitting on a park bench just watching the trees without my phone, I'm not failing at the hustle. I am making a highly calculated, biologically necessary decision to activate my default mode network.
Precisely.
I am actively preventing cognitive atrophy. I'm repairing the sponge so that it can absorb more water tomorrow.
That reframing is incredibly powerful because it dissolves the guilt. When you understand the neurobiology, when you know that silence is the actual environment where memory consolidation happens, you can protect that time with pride. You can look at the person grinding themselves into pure exhaustion at midnight and realize they aren't passing you. They are just burning out their engine.
Okay, the science is undeniable, and that quote is a massive light bulb moment for me, but I want to get very practical now.
Okay, let's do it.
How do we actually apply this ambitious nothingness to the messy reality of acquiring a difficult skill? Because we can't ignore the fact that learning English or learning to code or mastering a new job, it requires actual grueling effort.
Right. We have to be very careful not to swing the pendulum too far in the opposite direction here. The research is clear that active input, what they term friction, is strictly necessary.
Because, I can't just move to Rome, sit at a cafe for 5 years, achieve perfect Dolce Far Niente, and expect the Italian language to magically download into my brain via osmosis. If I never open a dictionary, nothing happens.
Exactly. You cannot bypass the friction of active learning. You have to sit down, you have to study the vocabulary list, you have to wrestle with the confusing grammar rules, and you have to embarrass yourself by trying to speak and making mistakes. That active engagement, that friction, is what generates the initial cognitive spark. It is how you acquire the raw materials of the skill.
But the raw materials aren't the finished product.
No, they aren't. And this is where we have to balance active learning with what the research calls the flow, or what I like to think of as passive fermentation.
Fermentation, I love that word in this context. It makes me think of baking. If we look at this whole process of skill acquisition like baking a loaf of bread, it perfectly illustrates why both steps are absolutely mandatory.
Oh, I like this. Walk us through the baking analogy. How does that map onto cognitive friction and flow?
So the active learning, the friction we just talked about,
Yeah.
that is gathering your ingredients and making the dough. You've got your flour, your yeast, your water. In language learning, that represents your vocabulary, your syntax, your grammar rules. And then you have to knead the dough. Anyone who has ever baked bread knows that kneading is hard physical work. It's tiring. There's a lot of friction involved. You are forcefully stretching the gluten, physically binding those ingredients together. That is the exact equivalent of sitting at your desk intensely studying those flashcards.
It's the active input phase.
Right. But, and here's the crucial part, if you just keep kneading that dough forever, what happens?
You ruin the bread, it gets super tough.
Exactly. If you never stop kneading, you overwork the gluten and you end up with a dense, unbaked rock. To actually get bread, you have to stop working. You have to take that dough, put it in a bowl, cover it with a towel, and walk away. You have to put it in a warm, quiet room and do absolutely nothing to it. And that period of doing nothing is the fermentation.
That's when the yeast does the actual work.
Yes. The yeast produces the gas, the dough rises, the structure expands, and all those complex flavors develop. But that transformation only happens in the dark when you leave it alone. The guilt-free silence we've been talking about is the warm room for your brain. If you never give your mind that space, the vocabulary words never ferment. They never connect into fluid, spontaneous thoughts.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the balance, and it perfectly encapsulates the ultimate conclusion of the research.
Yeah.
Mastery of a complex skill isn't achieved purely through forceful learning. It is achieved through gathering the ingredients via active friction and then allowing mastery to be absorbed through passive fermentation.
You have to respect the rise. You can't force the dough to rise faster by yelling at it or squeezing it.
No, and you can't force your brain to consolidate memories by stressing over them.
So this brings us to the million-dollar question. We understand the biology. We understand the strategy. We know we need to build that warm, quiet room for our minds to let the dough rise. But how do we actually overcome the intense emotional hurdle of doing it? Because sitting in silence when your phone is buzzing across the room feels almost physically painful for a lot of people.
It does. It's incredibly difficult. And to address this, the final section of the research tackles a concept that has been heavily distorted in modern culture, and that is self-care.
Oh, self-care. That word has been completely hijacked.
Totally.
Usually when people talk about self-care now, it means like buying a $20 bath bomb or drinking an overpriced green juice or booking a weekend spa retreat.
Yeah, society has turned self-care into just another product to consume. Or worse, another item on your to-do list. I must do my 10-step skincare routine so I can be properly rested and glowing for my 6 a.m. meeting. It's just hustle culture in a bathrobe.
Hustle culture in a bathrobe. That's so accurate.
But the research strips all of that commercialization away and provides a radically simple, yet incredibly challenging definition. True self-care is fundamentally just one thing: guilt-free time.
Guilt-free, meaning you aren't justifying it to anyone.
You absolutely do not apologize to yourself or to your boss or to your peers for taking this time. You don't try to rationalize it by saying, well, I'm taking 20 minutes to rest now so that I can work twice as hard later.
Oh, I do that all the time.
We all do. But the moment you attach productivity to the rest, it ceases to be rest. True self-care is the fierce, unapologetic protection of mental empty space.
But protecting that space is psychologically brutal at first. The research notes that when people try to do this, when they put the phone in another room and just sit in silence on the couch, they experience a severe panic response. How do we navigate that? Because if I sit on my couch to practice Dolce Far Niente and my heart starts racing because I'm thinking about unread emails, the affective filter is going to shoot right back up.
You have to anticipate that panic and treat it exactly like what it is: a withdrawal symptom.
Withdrawal, like coming off a substance.
Exactly like that. Your brain is deeply addicted to the constant drip of dopamine and cortisol provided by the hustle. When you suddenly cut off that supply by sitting in silence, the brain panics. It will throw every anxiety it can conjure up to the forefront of your mind just to get you to move. It'll say, did you pay that bill? Did you text that person back? You are falling behind. Do something.
So what's the protocol when that happens? Do we fight the thoughts? Do we try to force our minds to be blank?
Fighting them just creates more friction. The protocol is observation without reaction. You sit there, you feel the panic spike, and you let the thought pass without picking it up. You remind yourself of the strategy. You say, I am deliberately enduring the discomfort of this silence in order to heal my cognitive capacity. I am not being lazy. I am being ambitious.
It's almost like building a new muscle. The
Yeah.
first few times you try to sit in silence, it's going to burn.
It will be intensely uncomfortable. But if you hold that boundary, the panic eventually subsides. The parasympathetic nervous system finally engages. The default mode network turns on. And you finally give your brain the space it needs to breathe. True self-care isn't about luxury. It is the ferocious defense of your own mind against a culture that wants to consume all your attention.
Ferocious defense. I love that framing. It turns rest from a passive luxury into an active boundary you have to fight for. Okay, we have covered massive ground today. We started with the intense anxiety of the modern learner, feeling like they're constantly falling behind. We explored the biological nightmare of chronic fight or flight and that clenched sponge of the affective filter.
Right, and we contrasted that with the Italian art of purposeful pausing, really distinguishing true rest from the draining trap of mindless scrolling.
We dove deep into the neuroscience of brain atrophy and the productivity paradox, realizing that doing nothing is actually the ultimate ambition. We talked about kneading the dough of active learning and respecting the silent fermentation of mastery. And we redefined self-care as the guilt-free defense of empty space. It all builds to a very specific, practical challenge that we want to leave you with today.
This is where the theory becomes reality.
Exactly. So listener, here is the direct challenge for you. When this audio ends in a few moments, do not immediately click to the next deep dive. Do not pull up your email. Do not check your messages or open a language app. Give yourself exactly 10 minutes of total unplugged silence, no phone, no music, no screens. Just you, maybe a cup of tea, and a wall to stare at.
And we know, based on everything we've just discussed, that this will sound incredibly intimidating. Your immediate instinct will be to optimize those 10 minutes. You will feel that withdrawal panic. But resist it.
Remind yourself that you are not wasting time. This 10 minutes of nothingness is the most productive thing you will do all day. You are giving the dough time to rise. You are unclenching the sponge. You are literally rebuilding the neural pathways required for brilliance.
You are stepping out of the cult of hustle and stepping into actual mastery.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on as you enter that silence. Think about how much effort you expend every single day trying to force solutions, trying to memorize data, trying to push your career forward through sheer willpower. If our brains can only truly consolidate complex memories, solve intricate problems, and generate profound creative insights during moments of complete, unplugged silence, what massive breakthroughs, what life-changing decisions or brilliant ideas are you actively blocking right now, simply by insisting on being productive every single second of the day?
The cost of never stopping is the loss of your own potential.
So stop, just for 10 minutes. Let the ideas find you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now go do absolutely nothing.